Oh, I look better without the glasses on, that's for sure.
As long as you can see.
Yeah. Well, I can. It's all a blur. It's all, but you look better as well without the glasses. But,
Thanks. Yeah. You did it. Right, here we go. Just getting a set up on Facebook. Share to page that you manage. So go through to the Documentary Media Center. Next.
Yeah, give me a warning when we're set to go live.
Yeah, no problem. I said it will just start, and then Tina will give me a thumbs up, and then we'll just I'll do the introduction. Yeah.
I probably won't switch the camera off if I want to break. I'll just move out of shot.
Yeah, that'd be fine. You got that nice, got that nice thing behind you, haven't you? So.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Got a nice backdrop.
You're frozen again, John.
How'd you say?
You're frozen again.
I wonder why. I wonder what's going on.
You're back again.
Cool. Right, so I'm about to click the live thing. Okay, let's make a start. It's just gone 12 o'clock. So hello everybody. Welcome. My name's John Costa. Today our focus for the final parallel live session of our 10-day series, is all around Pakistan, with a Pakistan showcase. And today is also the UN World Day of Social Justice. We'll be looking at aspects of the country's art, its culture, and some of the hopes and challenges on issues around social justice and human rights. Now, we've pre-recorded interviews for you from those who have traveled to Pakistan, but also those that are in country who seek to make a difference. We'll take a look at the arts, education, and those struggling to find a voice in Pakistan. We hope to be joined live over the next hour, technology willing, by two people, one of whom is a British Pakistani, Muhammad Patan, for his impressions on Pakistan, a recent visit, and also from Karachi-based politician and social activist Rabia Asvar, who is a member of the Provincial Assembly, who we also hope will join us. Okay. We even have some traditional Pashto music, just to lighten the mood, from the peoples of the Northwest, dedicated to the lesser privileged children of a school that was being threatened by permanent closure due to the loss of funding due to the ongoing COVID pandemic. Now, I'm absolutely delighted today that my co-host for the next 2 hours of our lives, is Andy Goss. Good morning, Andy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good, thanks, John. Delighted to be here.
Good. Well, thank you for joining me. It's nice to have a co-host steering events forward. Now, you're an author, a local author, and journalist, and a humanitarian, and you recently published, and I'm delighted to say, signed for me, and I have in the archive, this novel that's based on your experiences of traveling to Pakistan to support the humanitarian relief effort following the devastating 2005 earthquake in the mountains of the Northwest. Now, the disaster claimed the lives of 80,000 people and left millions without shelter in just 30 seconds, which I think is an incredible statistic for anybody. So, Andy, welcome.
As I say, it's a pleasure to be here, John, and thank you so much for having me. Yes, I mean, we're talking about Pakistan, many different aspects of Pakistan today, but my involvement with Pakistan started just over 15 years ago, and it started with that terrible earthquake that you mentioned, which was colossal in size, and the casualty toll was huge. Many of them children who had been attending lessons that Saturday morning. So how did I come to be in Pakistan? You know, it's a question you may well ask. It was a country I knew nothing about, but at that particular time, and that was around about October time, in fact, it was October 2005. I was sitting as a production journalist at a Midlands newspaper, and I picked up a story, and it was a story about this tragedy in faraway Pakistan, a country I knew nothing about really. And as I read that story, I became drawn into it by the tragedy of it, the loss of life. As you say, it's mind-blowing. Less than 30 seconds. It wasn't just the loss of lives, it was the entire infrastructure as well that was gone. Bridges, roads, schools, hospitals, public buildings, housing, everything in that fragile infrastructure had been swept away in that short time. And as I was reading the story, which was about an international NGO called World Vision, that had its headquarters just down the road in Milton Keynes in the UK. I also Googled as much information as I could, really, just to understand a little bit more about what had happened. And among those contemporary reports was a story online from a young South Asia correspondent for the London Daily Telegraph, whose name was Peter Foster. And he was at the epicenter of the earthquake. He was based in Delhi. He'd felt the earthquake that morning. And within 48 hours, he was there in a town called Balakot, which was gone, absolutely, completely razed to the ground. And it was his harrowing report that was part of the motivation that led me to speak to my editor at the time and say, look, I'd like to go. I'd like to do something. And like all major towns across the UK, we had in Northampton, where I was based, a very large Muslim community, a Pakistani community. And therefore, the idea was that I go and tap into the sort of emergency aid fund being run locally and go away for 10 days and come back with a powerful feature series about this vast humanitarian event, this suffering that was going on in Pakistan. And to cut a very long story short, I headed out to Pakistan for 10 days. While I was out there, I was offered work, in fact, by World Vision, who needed a journalist to cover an international story in a very isolated part of Pakistan, a tribal area that had not been reached by any other aid agency. And I ended up going back and staying on and off in Pakistan for the best part of 5 years. And of course, you know, it was an incredible experience. And, you know, I was completely overpowered in a sense by a different culture. But not only that, the scale, the sheer scale of human suffering that I saw at every turn. Every family in the Northwest, and we're talking about a very isolated region of the Himalayas, had lost family members. They'd lost their livestock. They'd lost their habitats. You know, 3.5 million people suddenly homeless in the mountains, and the winter was moving in. And in the Himalayas, in that region, temperatures can sink to -20, -30 degrees centigrade. So it was a race to save lives, and it had a profound impact on me. I mean, I didn't realize when I actually headed out to Pakistan, quite naively, not knowing very much about the culture or the country, that it was to change my life forever, really, and the perceptions that I have about the way in which people live in different worlds, in different cultures. And what I found, even in this devastation, was an incredible warmth and hospitality in the people. I remember sitting in the rubble of people's homes, you know, being offered everything they had, even if that was their emergency biscuits, you know, their rations. I received enormous kindness, and they were just so grateful that somebody from far away, from the West, had come to visit them, and it was very, very humbling. And during the time I was in Pakistan, initially I stayed for a couple of years after the earthquake before heading back to Leicester, which is my home city, before returning in 2012. But during those years that I spent in Pakistan, I learned quite a lot about the culture and the people, and developed a love for those people, in particular the communities that are desperately poor, either in the mountains of the northwest or indeed in the rural areas of the Punjab or further south in Sindh. So people who often are living 4, 6, 8 people to a room, eking out a living from a small patch of land that they manage. And it stayed with me a long time. And I often think still of Pakistan and the time I spent there. And I was finally, a couple of years ago, able to have an opportunity to actually put my feelings, if you like, down to paper and write a novel based on my experiences in Pakistan, and the sorts of things that I saw, the sorts of things I was involved with, the things that I experienced directly. And it is really, John, it's a tribute, if you like, to people who live in poorer parts of the world, but also those who've been affected by disaster and their resilience. I mean, the resilience was remarkable. People who had lost everything, and yet they kept going, and they never lost hope. And a lot of that hope, of course, is based in their faith. So a tribute to them, but also to those who go to assist people in times of need, those mercenaries, missionaries, and misfits, if you like, the international aid workers. And I guess I've been a little bit of each of those classifications, if you like, at different times, but also the Pakistanis themselves, who also rallied to assist their brothers and sisters, if you like, who had been overtaken by this terrible event. So it's a tribute to those people, really. It's a tribute to those affected by and those who go out and assist people in need. And
I think that's what's so powerful about it. Just to jump in there, is what we try and do here at the Dot Media Centre is to present different opportunities and ways for people to be able to find out about real people, real places, and real events. And of course, what you have in that case is drawing together different things. So there'll be, the acknowledged documentary that's been done by Dogworth or has won an award, but then there'll be all of these other things that are on Vimeo or YouTube, and then there'll be the photojournalist series and photo essays and magazine articles, and then we try and combine that with podcasts and bringing together travel guides and all that sort of stuff. And of course, when you all try to bring personal testimonies and things like that together, there's still you've got to weave that narrative together for people and present it in that way. I mean, what your book does incredibly well, having read it myself, and almost 2 sit-ins. I mean, anyone that knows me very well will tell you, particularly Tina, that I don't sit down and read that amount in one go ever. But I think the good thing about it is it's factually accurate, and you quote something that you're going to read from your book in a little while from Peter Foster, the journalist, and more from Peter in a moment himself with the recording that we did with him. But you've got the actual facts, the figures, almost like mind-boggling amounts of people that were affected, with your own personal story, but then you've created a central character that it's around. And I think it makes it much easier for people to understand and get a feel for it. If you were to read the book now, having listened to you, the interviews we're going to play today with Peter and Miller, and then read the book, you'd start to get a feel from the people that have influenced you and what you see. And quite clearly what comes through from your book as well is your own love and devotion now to, you know, the Pakistan way of life, your desire to return, you know, your personal connections with the area. I think you've done an incredible thing with the book.
Well, thanks, John, for those kind words, and that's very gratifying for me to hear you say that, because that's what I set out to do. It is a fusion of fact and fiction. It is, however, based on first-hand experience or experience that I know others have had in Pakistan. I guess, in all honesty, the actual story itself that sort of underpins the book, only I will ever know how much of it is true, but certainly, you know, it is drawn from real experience and people, or a mixture of people that I came to know, that I shared time with, you know, in Pakistan. And so that's quite interesting, but the beauty of fiction, if you like, and that aspect of it is that you can put yourself in other characters' shoes. So in that way, the book may describe a certain scene from the eyes of a particular character, and that it will move to the perceptions that another character has of a different scene. So therefore, you know, there is the female-headed household and a lady called Shahida Bibi, who sees the rescue helicopters thrumming overhead, and they go to a different place. They carry on, and she's left without aid for another day, having already lost a daughter and having to keep another 2 children alive. And it's her perception. You know, some women are wailing, you know, God has forsaken us, Allah has let us down, and she says no, you know, because. And a lot of people at that time retained their faith in their God and said, okay, you know, we have our faith, we will survive, you know, we will carry on. So it gives that sort of 360-degree viewpoint, if you like, from different characters at different times, in different situations in the book. And I like that very much about it's a luxury that the novelist can enjoy. Some characters never existed. I mean, the story starts with a little shepherd boy hunched on a mountainside as the ground begins to shake and the boulders begin to roll down and the earthquake starts. And he's just huddled there, you know, reciting a prayer, the Kalma. And of course, his goats scatter, and suddenly, you know, it's still, and yet everything is destroyed. Now, that little boy never existed, and yet there were thousands, if not 10,000s, of little boys just like him that he represents. And it's the same with Shahida Bibi, the villager that sees the helicopters flying overhead and not being able to touch down and bring aid that particular day. Tens of thousands, and therefore they are a kind of every man or every woman, if you like, that do exist. So that's a great luxury about you know, writing a novel. You have a greater degree of freedom, and you know, if it's about creating an empathy, really, you know, and it's about finding that empathy. It's a disaster which, you know, you can easily look the other way and say it's very far away, it's 4,000 miles away, and yet when you start to look and get into the thoughts and the minds of the people actually affected, and you can do that in different ways, whether it's journalistic reporting, you know, or whether it's more creative writing. If you can find that empathy, if you can put a human face onto that situation and make it relevant to a new audience, a Western audience, if you like, then they can say, well, actually, that might have been my child, you know, that might have been my family. And they can start to empathize, and if they're moved by that, then hopefully sometimes, you know, they may be moved to action. But it's about trying to create an understanding, really. And I was very happy. I mean, for me, it laid a few ghosts writing that novel, because Pakistan had such a profound effect on me, and I wanted to kind of get it out onto paper, and I was able to do that. And so it was, you know, it was moving writing certain aspects of the book, and it was quite painful at times because it brought a lot of very sort of acute memories back. You know, I was lucky. I didn't, by the time I got out there, which was very early, it was a few weeks after the earthquake, by the time I'd managed to get everything together and all the permissions and so on. And it was about 4 or 5 weeks after the earthquake, but still it was just terrible, the extent of human suffering, because it was so difficult for the aid agencies and the military to access these remote parts in the mountains. And even 12 weeks after the earthquake, there were still communities high up in the mountains that had not been reached, that had basically, you know, had to survive, having lost all their infrastructure, their housing and their communication routes, and it was terrible. Every village had an extensive graveyard. Many of them were tiny little mounds of children. It was heartbreaking. Very moving indeed, and so it allowed me to kind of express that in a way and get that out of my head, if you like.
I think you've done it incredibly well with the book, and you know, certainly looking forward to seeing where your writing goes next. And I know maybe we'll touch on at the end and the next novel that you're working on. But
well, it's funny you should say that.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that at the end. But let's keep focused on this at the moment. So let's move it on now for people that are watching. We've got people that are viewing us on Facebook. So we're going to be looking at something. We were joined recently, so we did some pre-records with a leading UK journalist, Peter Foster, and he spoke to us about his time in Pakistan as the South Asia correspondent for the London Daily Telegraph, and what he found in the quake zone. Particularly, as he said, he at the beginning of this clip here, he actually felt the earthquake that morning in
Delhi. Yeah.
Of all, foreign correspondents did one's fair share of volcanoes and tsunamis. Of course, the 2004 tsunami, Andy, had been the year before. This event, seismic event that had killed people in Kenya and in Indonesia on the same day. And to be honest with you, the thing I remember journalistically, how frustrating it was to get to Balakot, to get to Pakistan, for this enormous, devastating earthquake which had been felt in Delhi. I felt it in Delhi that morning, and realised that the world was really listening. There was a kind of disaster fatigue, I think, and when you got there, you just realised the sheer extent to which this earthquake had devastated the region, and all of these houses were pancake flat on each other. And as I say, as a correspondent, you do your share of wars and tsunamis and refugee camps. Nothing, I think, is tougher than an earthquake. Brutally, the kind of smell of decomposing bodies, and the knowledge that people are trapped, people are dying under your feet, the first dog teams were starting to arrive, but there's just a limit. When all the roads are broken, particularly in a very remote and poor area like that, there's a limit to the number of acoustic listening devices, of heavy diggers, heavy movers that could be got there to shift chunks of concrete. And it was a very, very distressing time, not for me as a correspondent, but for that entire region. And of course, the earthquake had happened in school hours, so actually a lot of parents were out of their houses, and a lot of schools were crushed. A lot of children died. It was a very, very brutal disaster, and there was a sense actually that the world wasn't really watching. I remember the real frustration that there were a lot of heavy left helicopters in Afghanistan, for example, coalition forces still in Afghanistan following the 2001 invasion, and they weren't getting over there fast enough. It really sticks with you.
Some powerful testimony there from Peter, and it's the whole interview with him is available in the blog post on the Documentary Media Centre website, and it's definitely worth having a listen to because of obviously the impact that it still has on him all of these years later. And he actually commented in the book for you as well, didn't he, Andy?
He did, bless him. Yeah. I mean, Peter was there at the same time in Pakistan as South Asia correspondent, though we never met. And I only contacted him a couple of years back when I was writing the novel, because I wanted to quote the report that he'd actually filed at that time in 2005 from the epicenter of the earthquake. And it was something which moved me very much at the time, and my decision to travel to Pakistan. And he was absolutely wonderful, and he was very kind indeed. But I'd like to just read the words that Peter wrote at the time. They are in the novel, and it affected me quite profoundly at the time. Reporting within 48 hours of the disaster from Pakistan, the Daily Telegraph correspondent Peter Foster provided a harrowing account online of the chaos in Balakot, which Cousins, who's the main character in the novel, scanned. The timing could not have been crueler, the report read. More than 1,000 boisterous children were packed into their classrooms in the town of Balakot, northwest Pakistan. It was 8:50 a.m. Then the walls began to shake, and there was no time to escape. The men were in the fields, the women were at home, but the children of Balakot were crushed to death in their hundreds. Until 2 days ago, Balakot was a small, picturesque town perched on a hillside above the river Kunar at the mouth of the Kagan Valley, once famed as an idyllic tourist destination. Yesterday afternoon, bodies lay stinking in the street, covered only with flimsy shawls as survivors spent their energy on those still with a chance, scrabbling with crowbars and shovels to reach children entombed in layers of mangled steel and concrete. At the three main schools, there were heart-rending scenes as parents listened to the agonized cries of their children. "Save me," came the faint voice of a boy again and again from the ruins of a school where about 200 children were feared dead. "Call my mother, call my father," his mother wailed. "Bring my child out," beating her chest as other parents and relatives pulled out the bodies of 4 children. The only means of saving lives, heavy diggers and cranes were sitting idle on the impassable road several miles away, trapped behind a landslide that had cut off Balakot behind a small mountain of boulders and rocks. Helicopters thrummed overhead on their way to some place more chosen or lucky than Balakot, perhaps. The people looked expectantly skywards, but the relief drop did not come.
It's a really powerful report that he wrote.
It is very, very powerful indeed. And as you say, in talking to us, Peter said, even after all these years, it's still with him. It's still with him. And I think we'll hear a little bit more from him in a few moments.
So what we'll do now is, Andy, I know I asked Peter a question, didn't I, about how do you frame stories from different countries and cultures and make them relevant to Western audiences, because I think that's a really interesting one, because I think he mentions about almost like sort of famine fatigue, sort of disaster fatigue as well, isn't it? So let's have a quick listen to this one as well. Here at the Best Media Centre, that combination of people reading, like, the factual news, the reports and stuff, and then we've got like maps and magazines, and then Andy's book fits perfectly into the Pakistan section here. And you say here as well about the thing with natural disasters is that they not really happen to people, they happen to tell it to other people. And then you said about here this mixing together of facts and fiction, especially Andy recommending your report. But then it kind of weaves the narrative, which kind of takes people there. Do you think that's a good way of being able to get people to be more empathetic when other people? Or do you think that disaster
actually, people have shown over the years amazing compassion, given all most people are busy paying the mortgage and sorting out their own first world problems, and the difference. It's interesting, Andy took the kind of kernel of something and fictionalized it brilliantly, and that is one way of getting people to engage emotionally, getting people to realize that the child in the village, in the school, etc. Could be your child, as it were. There is a kind of common thread of humanity that runs through it, and I think whether you're writing, a good novel or indeed good reporting, the idea, the aim is to try and humanize it, because it does feel, on the one, if you're, sitting in Croydon or Crawley or Stockport or wherever, random places, looking at faraway rural northern Pakistan, it is a world away from you. That's not how you live, right? And there's a sort of temptation to think, well, those places are kind of poor and far away, and you hear people say things like, that they're kind of used to suffering, or they're somehow more resilient. Well, I think that's when you go there and you realise that the agonies, your job, whether you're doing it as a novelist, an aid worker, or a journalist, is to try and frame it in a way that cuts through, that makes people, understand, the kind of enormity of what happened, and if there's any point to it, because often as a journalist, frankly, you're there thinking, am I just getting in the way? Should I have a space on this helicopter, right? My space on the helicopter is one space that isn't being taken by an injured person. You have to think very carefully about that, and you have to weigh up, and you don't really know. You think, well, if you write a kind of report that says, finally we've got up over these broken roads, and the scale of the disaster is not yet fully understood, sense of flipping money, net, does that wash out? Was that seat on the helicopter worth it? Did somebody die because I was on that helicopter that night? You never lived the counterfactual, but those are the considerations. And, everyone has their role to play, I guess, is the way you rationalise it as a journalist. I don't think it was not entirely without merit, the journalism that we did, but it's complicated.
Again, I thought he was very honest when he was talking to us. Actually, it was really good to see him reflecting back on that time, particularly that seat on the helicopter. People don't necessarily think about that. I was talking to Jason Howe yesterday about sort of the paparazzi side of photojournalism for the news. People going where he was in Colombia and then Iraq and Afghanistan, and kind of Peter alludes there really about, when I'm on that helicopter going forward, am I stopping a doctor going forward, or someone that's able to help more than me? What is the balance? I thought that was really quite an interesting one.
I think so too, and I felt that as an aid worker and as a journalist out there as well. Also, there is the question, well, when you see such suffering so close up, your instinct is that you actually want to help that sick child, that injured person, and so can you get involved? Do you get involved? What's your role there? And I think it's very, journalists in particular have to be quite clear on that. Really, their job is not to get involved, but it's to report, and that's the most valuable role they can have in actually giving a voice to these people who are so desperately, so terribly affected. And that is a valuable thing to do, to bring that news, to actually bring understanding, to outside that particular world to another world, to another audience, and in particular to a world which is able to sponsor and to contribute donations to not just emergency relief work, but development work, more long-term work as well. But yeah, I mean, I've been in situations too where you think, well, okay, look, what is my value here, and do I, can I get involved? Do I get involved? it's not an easy question to answer at the time, you know, when you're faced with acute suffering, let's say, and your human instinct is to want to do something.
I think you touch on an interesting point there about donations with this global pandemic, where, you know, a lot of the people I've interviewed this week in different countries, all of their fundraising efforts and donations from the more developed countries have all dried up as well, because obviously we don't have the ability to go out and fundraise and have events, or even walk past a box to put some cash in and stuff. So it's really interesting. So we need to move on. Time marches on. So we were also very lucky to have someone else join us, a Scottish writer and humanitarian, Miller Caldwell. What a character Miller
indeed
was and stuff. And now he travelled nearly 4,000 miles there to look at the disaster, after being asked by a friend who'd lost a relative there to go out and actually get involved. So tell us a little bit about that, Andy, and then we'll play the clip from Miller.
Well, Miller was aware of the disaster, but as you say, he also had a Pakistani friend in the UK that he knew quite well, whose family had lost members to the earthquake. And to his own surprise, found himself moved to want to go to Pakistan almost on a whim. As you say, John, he's quite a character. He is a writer, he's a musician, but also he's an entertainer. And he actually took with him to Pakistan a ventriloquist monkey and a harmonica, of all things, and travelled out into the disaster area. I found himself at a meeting. It was a meeting about some issues that were going on in an internally displaced persons camp, so a refugee camp, people coming out of the mountains into the valleys to be protected, if you like, and to receive food and aid and assistance. And it wasn't working. And the army that was in charge at that particular time of the relief effort said to Miller, who was in attendance, "Would like you to be the camp manager because you're independent and we think you can do a good job and you're from the West and we trust you." And suddenly Miller found himself managing a refugee camp of all these poor people that have been, you know, streamed out of the mountains for assistance. Something like 24,500 people. Yeah, I mean, Miller will tell us a little bit more, I think.
Let's have a listen then. Yeah, let's have a listen.
John, by the way, the volume on the clips is a little bit low when they start. I don't know, there's a technical issue there.
Turn your volume up, mate. I can't make them any louder. Here we go.
All the locals love it. They describe it. It's this kind of El Dorado, Islamabad. And it's like this kind of bubble, because immediately you travel out of Islamabad and you're into Pakistan. And Islamabad is not typical of Pakistan. It was, as you say, purpose-built, you know, on the slopes of the first fold of the Himalayas next to Rawalpindi, the big military. And you know, a bespoke city, you know, built in the late 60s to a grid system, very organised, and of course it draws people from far and wide. It's this golden city. But yeah, it's a very strange kind of place. It's very Western. It's very liberal by comparison. But then you go into the mountains, and it's a bit of a culture shock. And one of the things that I found interesting about, you know, listening to you talking is that in a way you were kind of like almost in Pakistan on a whim, almost there by accident, and suddenly you're propelled into this role of being responsible for 28,000 people running a camp. And it's a similar story that I had. I went out on a 10-day journalistic assignment for my local newspaper and just happened to be in the right place at the right time and was offered work for this incredible story in a small tribal area known as the Black Mountain, which you've read about, and John, you've read about it too, which is featured in the book. But then things just seemed to take a life of their own, as if suddenly you were being directed to new experience and you just happened to be the right person for the right job. Very strange, and very strange too, in that I don't know about you, Miller, but I was quite naive. I didn't know anything about Pakistan when I went out there. And in a way, that naivety, that simplicity, that lack of any prejudgment worked in my favor. Not least of all because I never ever felt in any danger, although of course, as we know, Pakistan is a dangerous place. So it's kind of very strange how these things happen. And John, you touched on it as well, that sometimes you can be in this, you know, in a particular circumstance, and then things just seem to take their own, you know, momentum really. So it's very, very strange. But so Miller, how long were you there for in the Northwest?
Well, I arrived the first week of January and I left in the middle of March, partly because the government wanted to close the camps. But one thing I should go back to, just to clarify, you mentioned 28,000, 34,500 people. But how did I cope? Well, the farmer had two sons. One was older than the other, obviously. And the younger one followed me around because his English was excellent. So I was able to have a translator on my shoulder all the time. And the reason I left, partly because I was aware that my visa would have to be extended, because I only had a working visa, said humanitarian worker, but it's nevertheless meant 3 months. But the government wanted to, while the better weather was about to come, get the people out of the camps, all the camps, get them back to their home areas, to try and particularly get the food growing again, and to try and build the houses again in the summer that was about to come. So they didn't want the farm to be turned into cemented buildings and a more substantial camp. It remained tents all the time. And that's why I had to say my farewells.
But you're absolutely right, Miller. I mean, I remembered as well, there was this obsession by the government to drive the people out of the camps back to their points of origin. And really, the issues that we found, and I say we, was I was working for World Vision at that time, which was a large international NGO, as I'm sure you know, was that the people had nothing to go back to, had nothing to go back to. Some of these villages in the mountains were literally razed 100% to rubble. And so there was nothing. And there were issues over any kind of state support or compensation packages. It was very slow getting to the people, and then there were all kinds of conditions about reconstruction, you know, but this was the problem, was that, you know, the families would return having left, you know, under terrible circumstances, and returning to what they'd left, which was in effect nothing, because it had all been destroyed, with very little support to sustain families. So yeah, that I remember that too.
They had 3 months in the camp during which they bonded, and at the end, there really was a good bond between the different people, which implied that not that they would ever forget the earthquake, but they'd survived, and they'd been fed, and they'd been clothed, and they'd been given comfort to a certain level. And then the government said it's time to go. And of course, they weren't all 24,500 going different ways. They were going in village communities setting off. So there was I don't want to say camaraderie, it's not a very Pakistani thing, but it was like that. They knew each other. Pakistani word, I should say. And that was one sort of area of light you could have. But really, you're right, there was no support. And on paper, they were told that they had to go back, the better weather was coming, they'd be able to grow things. And on paper, that seemed right. But when they got back, it was different. The camps were closed.
Obviously.
So really insightful there. I mean, it was a fascinating conversation. It was a good sort of 48 minutes. It was only 50 minutes talking to Miller. So again, it's available, the entirety. It's posted as an embed from YouTube on the Dot Media Centre blog post for today's event. An interesting character, and we're about to talk to someone live shortly in the next couple of minutes when they join us about sort of Pakistan today, because about a year ago, just before lockdown, they managed to get back for a wedding. So we'll find out a little bit more about what their views are of that. So we'll just carry on talking till they join us. But I mean, from your perspective, again, someone that you didn't know at that time, Andy, but someone that's contributing a different version of what they saw of the same timescale.
Well, that's right. I mean, Miller and I, although we're working in exactly the same area, and that is Mansehra in what is now KPK, it's the northwest, the mountainous area of Pakistan, never came across him. I mean, who knows? We may have inadvertently rubbed shoulders, but strangely enough, he contacted me because his wife had seen a copy of my novel through her book club. And one of the things that one of the stories that Miller tells is that actually at one point he was actually confronted by Osama bin Laden.
If you hold that story, because that's what we're going to come on to in a little while. that's what sure. I was alluding.
So we'd never met each other, and then suddenly, you know, he what he said to me was, I love you, loved the book. And not only that, but my wife never believed me that I had seen the world's most wanted terrorist at that point, which is early 2006. So that's quite nice. But kindred spirit, Miller has story upon story. He's an amazing character. He's been a sportsman. He's played, you know, he's got 2 caps for playing international rugby. He's written something like 28 novels. You know, he's been a missionary out in West Africa. He's really seen life, lived it to the full, and believes very much in this idea of, I suppose, service, giving something back, really. You know, I think his father was a member of the Scottish Church, and he kind of picked up some of those principles, obviously.
Brilliant. But, so we're going to let Mohammed in now. Okay, so
lovely, super.
Yeah. Cool. Mohammed, how are you? Can you hear us okay? I think you're still on mute. There we go. There we go.
Hi, yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine. That's exactly how we start all of our calls now. Hi, how are you? You're on mute. It's almost like right. the 2021 way of introducing people. So, Mohammed, this is Andy Goss.
Hi.
Pleased to meet you, Mohammed. It's great to see your face, and I'd really be interested in hearing about your experience in Pakistan. I think last year, I believe it was. I don't know if it was the first time you've been to Pakistan, because you have roots there, obviously family roots. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how that experience was for you, as I suppose a British Pakistani, if you like. I don't know, straddling two different cultures in a way. How just tell us a little bit about that, if you would. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so last year was my second time ever visiting Pakistan. Prior to that, I had been in, I think, 2004 or 2003. So it was like a good 17 odd years in between the last visit and going back last year. So it was really interesting to see, because of how much development and change that had happened in Pakistan over the last 15 or 16 years between the 2 visits. And it was an interesting experience, because the first time I went back in 2003, I think I was around, I must have been around 14 or something. 14 or 15, or even less than that. I must have been about 12 or 13. And going as a young child to Pakistan and experiencing it for the first time and seeing the difference, because we traveled a lot in the first trip when we went in 2003. So we started off visiting Karachi, we went to Islamabad, Lahore, Multan, the whole thing. So we visited various different areas, and it was interesting to see how Pakistan is such a melting pot of different cultures. You feel like when you travel from one region to another, it feels like you're traveling to a few different countries because of how different the cultures are, the attitudes are to different things. So it was a really interesting experience as a child back then. And going back right now was going to a friend's wedding last year when I went. So it was really interesting to see how weddings happen in Pakistan and the whole cultural side of that, and the celebrations and the festivities and the color and all the different activities that go on in weddings, which is very different to what we experience in the UK, because it's such a different culture here for the British Asian community, as well as the culture back home in South Asia for the Asian communities, as well as British Asian communities when they're visiting back home. So it's really interesting and really enlightening to experience all that.
So Mohammed, tell us a little bit about your family backstory as well, because did you say that your parents met not in Pakistan, they met in Africa, is that right?
Yeah, so my ancestors are from the Pakistan region, and they left Pakistan at the time of just after the 1947 separation of British India into smaller regions. So their experience of Pakistan, so to speak, was very different to how Pakistan is today. Because at the time it was still British India, it was still controlled by the British Empire, and then they moved from one colonial region to another one in Kenya. So their experiences are very much shaped by the latter years of the colonial empire coming to an end, and that transition period where they were going from being a colony to getting independence and starting a formation of a new country. All of a sudden, the country they knew as one, which was just like, they had relatives on this side and that side, and it was the equivalent of knowing someone living in, say, Leicester and Manchester, and you'd be like, it's just two cities apart. Maybe it's like a 5 or 6 hour journey or a 10-hour journey because of how vast the landscape is, but it's still one country. And all of a sudden, it was two separate countries. They had a border in between, and the challenges that emerged from that as well, with nationalism rising in both of those areas, which we see today as well. It's just stemmed more and more as we see that there's a lot more nationalism, there's more patriotism between the two countries and their people. And it's very different now than it was back then, where they wouldn't have had that much tribal attitude towards their territories. So I guess whilst the independence and things were things that they strived towards and wanted that ability to self-govern, but some of the sadder things that came out of that struggle was the territorial attitudes that became entrenched in people's minds. And it's sad to see that there's so much difference and friction between India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the 3 or 4 regions in that area, which would have been just part of one big mass of land, now see each other as not the most friendly towards each other. So it is upsetting, but it's an interesting, when I hear back those stories from, like, say, my grandparents or other family members who are slightly more older, who had experienced that, and the way they speak about what their experiences are is very different to how we see India, Pakistan as a region today.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, Mohammed. I think one area where it's very apparent that there is this shared heritage between the regions of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, that part of South Asia, is in the arts, and this common thread that runs back actually thousands of years. And I know we'll be talking, we'll be hearing from a lady in Islamabad who was a champion of the arts in Pakistan in a short while. But yes, there is this shared heritage. You're absolutely right. The other thing I was going to ask you is, is it a bit of a culture shock for you to go from Britain to Pakistan? How do you feel? Do you feel torn, or do you just treat that as a different aspect of your makeup, if you like, that you, in a way, you straddle two cultures, the UK and the South Asian heritage, and of course the East African side as well. So how do you feel about that? You're obviously a very international person.
Yeah, I think that the experiences I've had from visiting, I haven't visited Africa, so it's something that I'd love to do, but we've got no family in Africa either anymore, so there's literally nowhere to visit. In that sense, Pakistan visiting has been easier because we have a lot of family friends still there, or now I've studied with people like last year who one of the fellow students was getting married, so I went to his wedding in Lahore. So it's very different having visited family or friends and families of friends there. But for me personally, I've never really felt torn or lost between the cultures. It's something that I've been able to, personally, I feel I've been able to benefit a lot more from, because like you said, there's such a varied culture shared through things like arts and music and everything in terms of the cultural aspect or the arts aspect of things. So I think as a person, it shaped me as a whole and given me a more wholesome view of the world. So it's helped me understand the different challenges that people face on both sides of the world, in the West and in Asia and Africa, in terms of not only the fiscal element, but also culturally and socially, and the values you grow up with, the values you are instilled with as growing up with family and elders in the family. And then when you go out and get educated, you experience a different world, or you travel and you learn more. And it's about how it shapes you as a person. So even though I see myself as very different to my ancestors who would have traveled from Asia to Africa and then subsequently to England, I still think that everything that I've learned from them has contributed into shaping me into what I am today. And I find it really beneficial because it allows me to be able to freely interact with people from different areas of life and different cultures. And whilst I may not be able to fully empathize with their experiences, that small part of me which I've inherited from my family or relatives around me, who through their stories or experiences and cultural things, it allows me to be able to easily bridge that gap and talk about my understanding of South Asian culture or East African culture, and learn from them and see how it's always interesting to see how much it overlaps. So it's really funny. When we visited Pakistan last year, my sister and myself went to my friend's wedding, and it was somewhere where we didn't know anyone else apart from my friend and his family, because it was someone I had studied with for a year whilst doing my barrister training last year, the year before last year, sorry. And when we went there, his family initially thought that we would struggle really much with the Pakistani culture, with the language, and it'd be a big barrier, and they would have to spend a lot of time looking after us and making sure that we're comfortable. But when they saw that we were so easily mixing in with not only his family, but also the guests and other people, and being able to hold those conversations because language wasn't a barrier. We grew up speaking Urdu with my family, so we were able to freely converse with them. And it was really interesting to see that their expectation of what a British Asian person going back to South Asia is very much inspired by things like, the movies they see like from the past, which is like things like East is East and those type of things, where they think that these guys just will not understand Pakistani language or culture or anything, and it's going to be a massive culture shock where these guys are so Western and they're not going to be able to adapt or understand, so it's going to be so difficult. And when we weren't like that, they were like, this is a surprise to us, where it's really lovely to see how in touch you are with your heritage, but at the same time you were able to balance that the Western values and the Eastern values and make amalgamation of it, which is quite unique. So I think I personally see it as a massive privilege for me to have that varying cultural elements, because it allows me to be, in my opinion, a more wholesome person in terms of my personality and my understanding of the world.
Brilliant. Listen, Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us, taking the time. It's always a pleasure to see you and see you going from a mentor to the Children's Council, as a member of the Youth Parliament, and then moving on to the UK Youth Parliament, and your interest in politics, special advising, and all sorts of stuff you've done with Europe. I remember your European Parliament stuff that we supported you with over the years, and obviously standing still to this day as the UK's youngest mayoral candidate in Leicester in 2010. You know, you've gone on to good stuff and done your university and your barrister training, and you're getting on. And we just couldn't think of anybody, when Andy and I were chatting, we needed a UK perspective. And I was like, actually, Mohammed will tell us what it was like to go back to the wedding a year ago, and just give us a really kind of up to date, because again, we would always be coming at it from a westernized view, whereas yourself, you've got that westernized coming from the UK, but of course you go back and you're able to seamlessly blend in as well, and see things slightly differently from us as outsiders, you know. So thank you very much for your honesty.
No, thank you for this opportunity.
Great to meet you.
Really thoroughly enjoyed this, and I want to say thanks to you, John, for all the support you've given over the years. I know personally that my professional development and my social development, I owe a huge amount of gratitude to you and Tina over the years for all the support. And I personally see you guys as my mentor. So it's always lovely and an honor to be called to, like, you know, share my experiences or have a chat with you. So it's
hopefully, really, maybe, thank you very much for that. Obviously, I'm humbled by those words. Maybe Andy and I can call on you another time, maybe for a longer conversation. I know with your political views and stuff like that, probably trying to understand the political situation in somewhere like Pakistan is very similar to India or the Middle East. You've got to have a real good knowledge. It might be something that we can do in the future if you're interested in that.
Absolutely,
that's great.
I'd love to be involved.
Lovely. Well, we'll let you deselect yourself from the call, and Andy and I will carry on. But thank you very much for taking the time, and please send our love to your sister as well.
I will do.
Great to meet you, Mohammed. You take care. Thank you.
Great to meet you too. Thank you. Take care. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Excellent. So Andy, interesting, because again, it's a kind of up-to-date perspective on Pakistan today. And as I was saying there, you know, Mohammed's able to go, and it's interesting, isn't it, that his friends, relatives were worried about they would have to kind of, you know, hold the hands of these people from the UK with their own version of what Pakistani culture is. And it just shows you their education, isn't it?
It is, and we've talked about this before. How enlightening it is. The more different cultures you are familiar with, the more you learn about human nature. And of course, we come back to the idea that actually, you know, all the common basic human needs run through us all, and we have that in common. You know, we have a shared heritage wherever we sit in the world. But interesting as well, because my own son Bilal has a Pakistani mother, so he also shares two cultures as well. So I was particularly interested in what Mohammed was saying. But John, where do we move from here?
Because we'll return to Miller, because we've split Miller in two, and you were talking about the Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about, you know, the enriching experience that Pakistan was for both Miller and I, and this wonderful hospitality that we found and a warmth in the people, who were, you know, despite this terrible human suffering, there was this warmth that came through from the people, and it was a very, very moving experience, I think is probably the right word, and very humbling as well. But at the same time, we're aware now, certainly, that there are certain dangers in Pakistan, not always those that you might think. But Miller tells a particular story about an encounter he had with Osama bin Laden. So perhaps we'll have a look at the clip.
Cue that up. my final point, and then I think Andy will pick up on obviously the interesting character that you met. But for me, it's interesting that Farouk mentioned to you about the situation, and then you end up going there, and Andy saw the report by Peter Foster and the journalist who we interviewed a couple of weeks ago. Andy's been in touch with. It's amazing, isn't it, that people come across these different reasons, whether it's still a story that someone's either done a journalistic report or has mentioned a personal connection, which in us, and I've had several of these in my life, suddenly I need to do something about that. Maybe if not me, who? Then you think, well, I'm going to go and do it, and it's amazing the impact that these have on our lives. So true. So Andy, over to you.
Yeah, one of the things I can't let you go without talking about, Miller, is your confrontation, your meeting with Osama bin Laden. Tell me a little bit about that, because as I understand it, you became quite ill at one point with flu, and you kind of had to be sort of transferred to Mansera. But I wonder if you could tell us what happened and tell us a little bit about that story.
Okay, well, before I left, I would have joined everybody in thinking Osama bin Laden was in a cave in Afghanistan. But when I got out there, I got this sort of flu bug, and I was as weak as could be. And that's when they said, look, you've got to rest, you've got to leave the camp. And they found a building called, it was run by the Muslim Hands Eye Clinic. And I was downstairs in one of the rooms and on a flat bed, recovering. And after about a couple of days, my energy really did perk up and I was feeling much better. May have been 3 days, but I've been saying 2 for so long. And there was a cut, an area in front of this building before the wall, and the car had come in to the drive, and I didn't hear it park, but I heard the 2 car doors close, and there weren't many cars that came to the clinic, so I perked up a wee bit, and then there was a shout at the front of the door, so I came out, and although it was a ground floor, I was 2 steps up, and I was standing on them. And there were 2 people. There was one man who was fairly short, but this man was at least my height, and I was 2 solid steps up. You know, the tallest Pakistani I had ever seen. There was no doubt about it. And salam alaikum, mitikum salam, you know, we got through the greetings fine. And he looked at me and he could see my skin was, although I had the beard and I had the right Pakistani attire, it was probably a little bit whiter than most Pakistanis. And he said, who are you? And I said, I was the camp manager at Mundihar. And he nodded. And he asked of someone I'd never heard of, and I told him I didn't know who he was. I said I was recovering from flu. Now his English was different from Pakistani. He was very well educated. And he said, where are you from? And I said, Scotland. And as soon as I said Scotland, he turned and hobbled as quickly as he could get back to the car. It was a blue 4-door car. I got into it and ducked down, and the car left and turned towards Abbottabad. So later that day, I had some visitors from the camp, and I said, I'm pretty sure I met Osama bin Laden, and he was heading off to Abbottabad. And this was the 6th of February, 2006. And they said, oh yeah, you saw him, did you? And I said, did you know he was here? Oh, he comes to Mundihar, he's been in the market there. Oh yes, several people, we know him, yes, he's been around. And I said, well, you know, if you captured him and gave him to the Americans, you'd probably be quite wealthy. And he said, why would we do that? And I said, well, it's just, I suppose, a Westerner speaking. He said, but it was payback time. The Americans had done this, had done that. And we were always at the end of that. And we feel, all right, we got even. Now, of course, it's a horrible thing, what happened in 12/11. But not 12/11, what am I talking about?
9/11.
9/11, yes. That was seen as an entirely different perspective on this man. So I said no more about it until I got home. I went to see the chief constable, who I knew very well, David Strang, and I told him where Osama bin Laden was. He was almost certainly living in Abbottabad. And I also told my MP on another day, separately, Russell Brown MP, exactly the same thing, how I'd met him. I told my wife, and she couldn't believe it. But both of them said he was in an Afghan cave, and implied I was deluded or something. Well, 2011 came, and the US SEALs found him in Abbottabad, and they killed him, and he was buried at sea, according to strict Islamic laws. And they had revealed he had been in Abbottabad since 2006, which is when I met him, when everyone else said he was in an Afghan cave. And therefore, I realized there was never any doubt in my mind. One, he was the tallest man I'd ever seen in Pakistan. Two, his English was perfect, unlike every Pakistani I've met. And the third thing,
well, of course, he's more Arabic in appearance as well, because of course he's a native, or was a native of Saudi, wasn't he? So a very different kind of law.
He spent some time in Sweden as well, so very Western outlook to some extent.
Well, we've talked a lot about, you know, circumstance and kind of things happening, but I wonder, you know, it strikes me that both of us really kind of decided, for whatever reason, to go out and do something. What would you say to other people that may look at, you know, the sorts of problems that there are in the world and want to do something? I mean, both you and I have actually decided, sometimes almost on a whim, I mean, it was for me, to go and do something, and then something extraordinary has happened. You know, these sort of boundaries that you imagine in your head beforehand seem to fall away, and circumstances propel you forward for sort of unknown reasons. What would you say to people that actually, you know, might want to do something, go out somewhere, do some volunteering, you know, support people in need? What would you say to them?
Well, my wife was like that. She was a chemist with Beecham's doing preparatory medicines. She decided she hadn't done enough with her life. She decided she would go to VSO, and she asked to go to India, and they sent her to Ghana, and that's where I met her. But I think it goes back many years before. I grew up in a manse, and I had a father who was a Church of Scotland minister, and his wife, my mother, was the practical one. He was the one who did the marriages, the funerals, the weekly services. And mother used to get the down and outs who'd come to the house, and she'd give them a meal in the back garden, and some of these down and outs would weed the path, doing something in return. Others just were grateful to have something to eat, and off they went. And I thought, that's what Christianity is about. Now, I'd say now I'm not a Christian, but in those days, that left an indelible mark in my mind. It's what service was about. So,
what an interesting character Miller is. You could probably sit with him forever. You want to be stranded on a circling aeroplane with Miller coming into land somewhere, don't you? It'd keep you entertained, take your mind off it completely. Yeah, Andy, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Apologies. Yeah, he's a great guy. And as you say, story upon story, he's lived a very, very full life. But yes, I mean, he's talked about a rather strange encounter that he had. I mean, you know, I've touched on it as well. You know, some of the areas that I worked in were quite lawless, very, very remote, and certainly some of the tribal areas. You know, the people are effectively their own police force, their own judiciary, their own army, and the people are heavily armed. I have to say I never felt safer than when I was in those areas, because if you were invited into a village or a region like that, then, you know, they operate a code of conduct, and you are their friend, and they will protect you if necessary, with every last man in the village. But yeah, there are dangers in working overseas. I mean, not always those sorts of dangers you might expect. I mean, for example, you know, I was bounced one time by the military traveling through Kashmir, Pakistani administered Kashmir. And it was nighttime, and I nearly died of exposure. It was sort of -20, -30 at the time. And another time I had an infection, and it became so bad I nearly lost my left leg. It's those sorts of things that you have to deal with, and that you know can affect you. You have to take great care in every sort of area, really. But generally, you know, I always felt very, very safe in Pakistan. But yeah, it's a fascinating region where the earthquake struck. You know, it's an area, you know, of the Pathans. They're a loosely linked tribal people that stretch from the northwest Pakistan across into Afghanistan and a little bit into Balochistan as well, in the southwest of Pakistan, and that's an area that actually borders Iran. So it's a fascinating area. The people I always found to be very direct, fairly straightforward, and to be people of their word. And you know, I have great affection for them as well. And they have a great culture as well, which is in some ways a little bit different to other parts of Pakistan. And I think Mohammed a little bit earlier referred to that some of the regions are so different. I know some Pathans don't consider themselves to be Pakistani, for example. They are perhaps quite different from Punjabis or from Sindhis, you know, people in Sindh province. And then Balochis, you know, the people of Balochistan are different again, as are the people in the extreme north, you know, in the northern areas of Pakistan, which goes right up to the Chinese border. So it's a fascinating country, Pakistan, of all these different cultures, many different arts and crafts and so on. And I know we have a film from Nagin Hyatt. I don't know if we want to show that at this point, John, or
I was going to talk to you about the school, because this will give us an opportunity to talk about why we actually have done this event.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm just got one eye on the fact that someone's joining us at past. Okay, so if you can just tell us a little bit about Latif and how you guys met, and then a little bit about the school and the backstory, and then maybe we can play the school intro and things like that, and then we'll be getting ourselves quite nicely towards 1:30. We've probably got time for Nagin's film before then as well. So.
Okay, Syed Latif is a Pathan, and we go back to the earthquake 15 years or so. And Latif was working for a Pakistani NGO called Bright Education Society, and World Vision, with whom I was working, needed an implementing partner to get aid into this very remote part of Pakistan, a small tribal area called the Black Mountain, or Kala Daka. And so Latif and his associate became our implementing partners and put teams together to actually distribute the aid to grassroots level. So you go back a long, long way. And part of this Pakistani NGO's work, again, stretching right back even before the earthquake, was to run a school in Karachi. Karachi is in the far south on the Arabian Sea. It's as far south as you can be in Pakistan. It's a huge port metropolis. It has a very, very large ethnic migrant Pathan population. And many of the Pathans have gone there to seek work, often quite menial work. And there is great poverty in certain areas of Karachi that are populated by this ethnic Pathan group. So there is a school that Latif runs. It's for children whose families are so impoverished that indeed often they would not be able to send their children to school unless it was for a place called Nahal Academy, which is the school that Latif and his local NGO runs in Karachi. And the reasons, well, perhaps our next guest can explain a little bit about the reasons why some children are not able to attend state schools, for example, because of the extreme poverty that their families are in, and so sometimes the children are required to help with the family income. Sometimes there simply isn't enough cash even to buy school uniforms or whatever else they might require to go to school. And so this is a wonderful school. Unfortunately, it's been hit with a problem due to COVID and the pandemic. There's a funding crisis, and hundreds and hundreds of children might be forced to lose their education if the school closes permanently. So that's something of an issue right now, which again we can talk about.
You spoke to Nagin at Nomad, at the Nomad Arts Centre, about doing something. This was our original conversation, wasn't it, about a fundraising drive to help the school to stay open with the troubles that it had. Yeah.
It was, and bless her, Nagin Hyatt in Islamabad approached the local politician, who is a lady called Madam Rabia. She's an MPA, she's a member of the Provincial Assembly in Pakistan, but she's also something of an education champion, as indeed she is for other aspects of social justice in Pakistan. And Ms. Rabia visited the school and has made an inspired intervention, which gives the school hope now that it can continue and that these children will be able to have an education. So that's a very, very positive thing that's happened very recently, actually. I know there's still a way to go, but the bulk of the funding deficit seems to have been sorted out, and there is now real hope that these underprivileged children will have a brighter future and a full education. And it's a wonderful school. It's a wonderful school. I know we've got a clip of it as well that shows it's a good place to learn.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the school. I showed the clip while you were talking a moment ago. Yeah. It's an interesting place, and again, it's part of that broader culture, isn't it? We've got some songs that we're going to play as well. We've had some people, quite well-known singers from the area as well. I've also recorded some little clips and stuff. So maybe we'll do that after we've spoken to the MP. And Nagin has been a great supporter of not only this project with yourself, but also talking about the arts and the empowerment of women, and how you can have conversations about some of the more challenging subjects that we need to be having in the world today, about equality and access to women to justice and all these kind of things, through arts and cultural activities and stuff. And she's made this film for us, hasn't she? about her centre. So would you like to maybe just introduce that for a minute or so, and then I can play it, and then that will take us up to 1:30.
Nagin's run the Nomad Arts Centre in Islamabad for a number of years now, and it is about promoting the arts and crafts as well, sometimes finding markets for some of the poorer craftspeople that work out in the villages. But also Nagin is very much in support of social justice and human rights as well, rights for women. And I know she believes as well that the arts is a great medium for expression, if you like. Sometimes in a society, that is a little bit restrictive on certain issues, and the arts allow a voice and allow a subject to be addressed as well. But you're looking across the arts, you're looking at everything from poetry, from singing, from filmmaking, literature, painting, and there's some absolutely wonderful stuff that is promoted through Nomad, and
okay. So let's have a look, shall we? Should we have a quick look at the film that we've got here?
Or if it's women's empowerment is extremely important to us, particularly in a patriarchal society that we live in. Over the years, there have been challenges during military regimes or otherwise of the kind of art you could show, the kind of films you could make. Pakistan has a long history in beautiful art, fantastic regions, culture, crafts, indigenous crafts, basically. Yet the women get left behind because of patriarchy, because of marginalization, and also because of certain discriminatory laws that came about during the Ziaul martial law period. Many people have stood together and fought for those, and trying to get to a place where there is equal opportunities for all. Talking about the present period, we have gone through, like everybody else, the COVID pandemic, which has affected businesses, works, people's lives globally. The tragedy is that in developing countries, it is probably a step worse because of lesser privileges. And therefore, we were running a beautiful gallery and cultural center, the Nomad Center, in Banigala, which we closed about almost a year back due to not being able to meet the overheads due to COVID, because people are not willing to step into public spaces, and also because we felt that the new way to go and the new life now is to go digital, to be online, and we are on social media as well as working on organized shows, pop-up shows, and private viewing. That may not be the best way to go about it, but I don't think this is the time to complain. We are very grateful. I am very personally a person who is grateful for what we have and what we can make of that. But it becomes extremely difficult at times when you have to link up with your partners, your communities, the craftspeople. Some of the artists are depending on us, for almost for survival. And since we don't have any government or donor support, we don't have a permanent place, it becomes extremely difficult at times. However, we intend to carry on the way we are.
I'm just going to stop it there, Andy, because again, that whole film is available for people to look at on the blog post at 6 minutes 45. So I'm sure some of the people that are watching that I'm looking at now on Facebook will be interested in finding out a little bit about that. And the reason I've taken the break there is because we've actually got Madame Rabia waiting in the waiting room. So we'll let her join the call, and we can do our hellos. Hello, Madam Rabia, can you hear us? Here we go. Madam Rabia, can you hear us okay? I think you're on mute. If you could just unmute yourself. Lovely.
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, how are you?
Hi. Very well, thank you. Welcome to the UK. Thank you for
you.
joining us today.
Right.
For
My
our
pleasure.
special, it's for our special session on the World Day of Social Justice. We know that you're a very busy person, and we're grateful for you to be able to join us, and it's lovely to meet you. We'll dive right in with my first question, I think, and then what I would do is I'll then hand you over to Andy. So I'm very interested to hear about what you believe are the hopes and challenges today for yourself providing education for boys and girls in Pakistan, because I know you've come on board with this support for the academy in Karachi, which is wonderful, and it sounds as if it's making some positive changes and some positive movements. But again, that's just one school that's part of a bigger challenge that many countries have. But maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my conversation, John, will be more focused towards, the scope or the issues which are related to the province Sindh I belong to, because I'm a representative or a member for the Provincial Assembly Sindh. Yes, I do have the visibility from the educational related initiatives that the PMIK or Imran Khan has taken, and his basically team members, which is the Federal Minister Shafkat Mahmood, working on a single national curriculum, and some other initiatives like the Madrasa reforms too. But in addition to that, if I think my core objective of this discussion will revolve around the province of Sindh, because I am privy to the information that I have being on the ground, and certainly the challenge at hand is huge. Sindh being one of the most progressive provinces, because it has a business hub, which is Karachi, and certainly that should have given a different perspective in terms of education coverage as compared to the other provinces of Pakistan. But unfortunately, the situation is completely opposite. For last almost like 2 tenures of the PPP-led government in Sindh, we hardly see any corrective measures in terms of addressing the issues of education in Sindh. Sindh in last 2 years back, we saw the report of the international agencies reporting that the literacy point of Sindh is dropping as compared to Sindh, as compared to Balochistan, which is far more underdeveloped province, which is a sad situation. But it's like a 10th or 11th year of this government, and we don't see that the fundamentals that requires their attention are being addressed. Different donor agencies come and go, and they basically devise different projects with government, but they're not sustainable. They're not bringing any sustainability or a growth path towards ensuring the right to education, which is part of our constitution in Article 25A, but somehow it is completely ignored in Sindh. We have almost, and I would like to put a caveat there, that there is no authenticated data so far, because government shies away to publish that numbers as well, because we are reducing, or we are basically increasing the out of school children year on year. And right now, the number that we normally refer is 6.4 or 6.9 million children are out of school in Sindh, whereas our constitution says that Right to education is free and compulsory education for the age 5 till 16. So certainly, it's a huge number. But what contributes, the overall situation of not covering out of school children is the secondary education. Reason being, we have like almost, an inventory of 49,000 schools in the province, which is a declared number by government itself. Out of those 49,000 schools, 99%, or you can say fairly, like 47,000 are basically the primary schools, and only 2,000 are secondary schools, which means grade 6th onwards, there is no facility available to basically take the children towards the secondary schooling. So we've been given different proposals to the government to address this issue. They have a body called Sindh Education Foundation, and we tell them that rather than you investing in brick and mortar projects which never completes, we have seen like 13 years the same projects carrying forward in every budget. It is better that you invest this money, equip the Sindh Education Foundation, whose mandate is to increase the enrollment and also to address the issues of the public-private partnership model, and you equip them and onboard big education networks in the province, in major cities at least, and ask them to run second shifts and pay them the subsidy per child so that they give quality education and infrastructure to these children, and you will be able to address the gap. But somehow, I personally feel that, and there are a number of other issues I can talk, hours on this. But the problem is that we don't see a will. We don't see the fundamentals, or initiatives that address a teacher in a classroom, which is the fundamental thing, right? You cannot give education if you don't have a delivery system. The second is the enrollment, which is the secondary schooling. The third is, I would say that, the curriculum is not that bad. It's just that the reachability or accessibility of the books and the literature and the curriculum in the hands of the children is an issue. So we are not correcting those fundamentals. We are bringing new, and in the name of reforms, we are bringing different initiatives which are of very small scale, and there is no sustainability or scalability plans attached to it, such as like, look at the Finland initiative that we are taking in Sindh. So these are showcase projects. These are more like a show off projects, but it doesn't bring any positive contribution to the bigger issue. So that's basically a high level overview.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I mean, we wouldn't have got that anywhere else. And I'm sure there would be very few mainstream media organizations that would take that level of dialogue from you and honesty and passion. And it obviously comes across that you're passionate about education. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting throughout this week, this is obviously the 10th day of our program, talking to people who are activists and engaged in all sorts of activities when it comes to the empowerment of people on the ground, is the fact that education is probably one of the few things that we can still do and ensure for the future of any nation moving forward, is investing in its young people, and particularly girls and young women, in order to fight maybe some of those more restrictive. I'm very careful about what I say now, rather than our Western view of people's culture, but maybe some of those things that are seen as more restrictive, things like, marriage, whether it's, headscarves, all those things that play out in the mainstream media, being able to, at least the basics of reading and writing and education, being able to have a career, doing those kind of things, they're all going to benefit Pakistan in the long run, aren't they? If it's new tourists opening up, who's one of our interviewees has been speaking about, it's so key, isn't it? And it's a constant challenge. And really, I often say here in the UK, we should take education out of politics, because it's almost more important, isn't it? The role of the education of children, particularly young girls, is very important.
Absolutely. And Jonah, I just want to give you two informations, which is very critical. Our political system and education is quite interlinked. We have education system, which basically is considered to be a fundamental piece of our electoral system. That's basically I feel that's basically a flawed way, because that is how we're making this whole education system, and the delivery of it is political, because we hire teachers based on our political preferences. We basically build school based on our political preferences. We basically give favors in terms of education, just because we want to gain a perspective or a vote in that particular area. So that is the reason it is completely politicized. Education should be, and I absolutely agree with you that it should be the subject which should not be linked with politics at all. But certainly, since we all parties are political parties, we do carry this as a manifesto, the delivery of education, right to education as part of our manifestos. It is important that there has to be an independent mechanism of ensuring, irrespective of the gender, that we ensure all have the right to access education, be it a girl or a boy. Right now, the challenge that I see on the ground is something that, why it is restricted for girls, because we don't have the basics available. For example, if there are 5 schools in a locality, there is no girls' school in that area. Secondly, if there is a girl school, which is basically till 5th grade, but secondary education, we don't have a secondary schooling in a particular radius, which is 1.5 to 2 kilometer. So the problem is basically I do agree that we have certain, you can say that certain cultural boundaries, but parents do want to send their girls. It is not that they don't want to, but what is government doing in terms of equipping them to send girls in certain radius and ensuring their safety and security? That is the piece which is missing. Secondly, at the age of something, when girls touch puberty, they need to have a clean toilet access. How many schools, even in the urban cities of Sindh, how many schools do we have a proper toilet system, or a system where we can give a facility to a child or a girl to basically have a safe and secure environment for personal hygiene? So these are the issues which are restricting, and I hold government responsible for it, because one of the key components is the infrastructure. And if you don't provide the right infrastructure, people will say, or parents they don't feel comfortable that the girl should commute all alone to a far-flung area. And that is why it only gives a priority to the boys in the certain areas of our province, that they can only achieve the education. So it is direct and indirect restriction both, that we restrict girls from accessing education. And I fully agree, said, because, yeah.
I think one of the things that's
yes,
really
please go
interesting,
ahead.
and I'll hand over to Andy, is just one final point is, when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and we talk about quality education and equality for children, like particularly young girls, we tend to focus on the education as in its teachers, books, classrooms, and that bit. In fact, that's not the bit that's the problem. Yeah, it's the ability to get to a building that's safe, secure, has got the facilities and the infrastructure. It's really interesting. It's only when you talk to activists like yourself on the ground and people that are privy to that information, do you suddenly realize it's not about a willingness for someone to teach or a willingness for someone to learn or parents willing to send their children to school. It's the fact that it's the infrastructure that's missing. Andy.
Yeah, the fundamental is the infrastructure is missing, and certainly, we're not giving the comfort that the parents or the families need, that they'll be able to send their children or girls specifically to the schooling. Yeah. Yes, Andy.
First of all, hello. We haven't really said hello, but it's an absolute pleasure
Hi.
to meet you. And as John said, thank you so much for joining us. It's a huge challenge you face, and I know I've been following you a little bit on Twitter and social media. I know you're absolutely passionate on this mission for the children of Sindh to create, you know, a better system for them and an education for all. So I thank you for that also. And I think it's wonderful. I know you've personally intervened in Naunahal Academy in Karachi, which is a school for lesser privileged children in some very deprived areas of Karachi. And I know that school was facing a very uncertain future, and there is now real hope that the education of hundreds and hundreds of children, girls and boys, will be safeguarded due to your intervention. So thank you. I'd say I'm absolutely in awe. So thank you, madam, for that. I think really I just wanted to touch on a slightly different aspect, and I know it's something that seems close to your heart as well, Rabia, is the inequality in terms of numbers of women in politics. And I know you're a very strong voice and passionate voice, but I know you're calling for a much higher percentage of women to be represented and to take their seats in the provincial assembly. So I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that in terms of how it is for you and the sort of barriers perhaps that exist to women in politics.
So Andy, I mean, I don't want to sound that, you know, everything is okay for me, and rest probably it's their individual issue, but it is a basically and obviously an obvious issue for the women in politics in Pakistan. We have basically, you know, we have reached to some extent, we have covered that journey where people like me are basically do not have any political background, do not have any political affiliation or family, you know, inheritance, politics as an inheritance from our side. We're truly professional, you know, people from middle class family, and have been able to reach in the assembly. For me, it looks like a miracle, honestly. And the party that I belong to, I'm glad that they have basically, you know, when the nominations were happening, there were more than 100 women, and I was selected as number 3 in Sindh. And all the people who were basically the part of the assessment board or the evaluation board who were supposed to select were literate people. They were not conventional politicians. They were politicians. They are politicians. But you know, one of them is now president of Pakistan. The other one is an ex-MPA, Samar Ali Khan. Another is a port and shipping minister right now, Ali Zaidi. And the other one is opposition leader, who's ex-opposition leader, Firdaus Shamim Naqvi. So all these were like very literate people. They were good people. They picked up the right. It's not just because they picked me, but they have picked up many in terms of, you know, qualified people coming from corporate sector, and giving a new face of politician to the province. But certainly it's a very difficult, it's a rough route. It's not an easy path. Reason being that, first of all, I am all for 50-50 parliament, and that's what I you know, force, or I like to struggle for. Education is one thing, but this is another serious you know, area which needs a lot of work. Reason being that we have a population of 49-51 ratio, and look at the amount of women we have. Like within 30 members of us, of PTI representing in Sindh, we're only 5 women. We are basically leaving that 50% of 51% of perspective of women in terms of legislation, in terms of, you know, all the activities, political activities, and the awareness, the you can say that the public participation in the whole process of of legislation, plus the governance as well. We're just leaving behind that aspect because we don't have the true representation of women. So our laws need to be gender neutralized. Our governance should be gender neutralized. We should have a fair representation of women in every police station, to deal with the situation when a woman comes with an abuse case, when a child is there for a complaint. So all those handlings to be done with a very in a very sensitive way, and women can be the best one to handle those situations. But unfortunately, we still have a long way to go. Although my party is conscious of the fact that they want to really bring right women for the right reasons, but somehow I feel that one thing for sure, that we must be allowed to contest on general seats, the winning seats, which is the first request of mine to my own party as well, that we should be allowed to basically contest on general seats. And if we lose, then we should be given to a right to be selected on a women reserve seat, so that we should not be labeled that you're there, you just came, you're privileged just because you got, without any effort, you got a seat on a women reserve seat. And then all the process of the governance, all the process of government related are basically given to men, just because they have a constituency, they have worked hard to build that constituency, and women are not given those duties or roles just because we don't have a constituency. So I feel that the first thing should be done in terms of the change of the process, that we should be, all women should, at least party should be given 50% seats to women on general seats, and those who lose should be given a priority to be selected on the reserve seats. And that's how we'll basically evolve in our electoral process.
All journey. It's all about journeys, isn't it? You're taking people on a journey. There's no quick fixes. We look for quick fixes either in the real world or in the media or on television, entertainment. Whereas in fact, all of this stuff, it takes much longer, doesn't it? We've got to start putting in them. Really, education of children is one of those places that we really can start to build the value of equality and shared voices and views for the future. So we're just coming up to the end of our time with you, Madam Rabia. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Andy, any final comments from yourself?
I'd just like to say, Ms. Rabia, power to you. I respect you enormously. I've kind of got a sense of how hard you work, you keep your promises and you follow through. And I am absolutely, it's been a great pleasure to meet you. So thank you. Knowing how busy you are, thank you for your time to join us. And we'd love to be able to talk to you at some point in the near future again.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, John. And it's totally my pleasure to be, talking about some of the critical points. Not everyone is ready to talk about the gender issue in the politics. It's good to basically take my perspective as well. And it's a good platform to basically have general discussions rather than the current affairs.
Yeah.
Best to you from the UK.
Yeah, I know at least a couple of young women of your culture here in Leicester who are heavily involved and have been since Children's Council and Youth Parliament, and also the UK Youth Parliament, and are now involved in politics at university, that will be very interested in talking to you. So maybe we'll be coming back to you for an interesting Zoom call about the role of women going forward with the SDGs and politics and stuff. So thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, John, what an inspirational woman. Thank you again, Ms. Rabia.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I just have to basically disconnect. I don't just give me a second. I just
no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can stay all day if you want to. That's okay. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, Andy? Because we've had a kind of real juncture position as well with the one that we're about to talk to as well, about different roles that people have in being able to access information, views and stuff like that. I think it's absolutely fascinating. There we go. Madam Rabia's gone, I think, because
Incredible.
obviously we've had the view of someone like Peter as a journalist, similar to yourself, of a particular time, or someone that's gone there for a particular reason. You've got Miller as well, who was almost asked by a Pakistani national to support him in his journey to go and help in that region. And then we've got, the school, we've got Nagin with the arts. We've spoken to Mohammed, who's got that kind of heritage kind of once removed, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Because I never realized that, as a young man, he's got this Indian, Pakistani, Kenyan and UK perspective on the world, which it probably makes him much more engaging and more willing to talk to other people about his journey. And of course, you've got someone like Madam Rabia there, who's totally committed to access to politics and making change. Yeah,
indeed. It's well, where do we go next, John? That's the question. But yes,
well, we'll be very lucky to have an opportunity to talk to lots of different people. And I think what we'll do is we'll end with the songs after our next segment. Okay, so we were very lucky to have a conversation. It took us 4 or 5 bites of the cherry, I believe the technical term is, to get Zinfia Ritchie to come and talk to us, and we only just managed to pull that one off yesterday morning at 7 o'clock UK time, didn't we? Which was quite interesting, bit of a challenge. And it was fascinating talking to Zinfia, because she's been in Pakistan and Islamabad for the last sort of 10 years, or more than 10 years, sort of 2009, and is quite a controversial figure through the fact that, she kind of speaks truth to power, I believe the technical term would be, or a t-shirt, but also is not afraid to challenge some of the systems there as well, but is also a champion of Pakistani culture and the regions and stuff. So he's one of those characters that we felt it was important to talk to, and you were very lucky to have a longer conversation with her a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? And then you decided that we should have a chat with her. So maybe introduce Zinfia, and then we can tee up the conversation.
Indeed. Well, Cynthia is a remarkable woman too, in that she is a Texan. She's American. She's lived in Pakistan for 10 years or so. She absolutely loves the culture, loves the people, and she is a champion for Pakistan. But in a way, also kind of straddling 2 cultures, really, the Western with the Pakistani culture as well. She is a writer, a filmmaker. She is a blogger with a very large platform across social media. And she's not afraid to voice her opinion on in terms of social issues and human rights. And that has won her an enormous amount of fans, as it has landed her in controversy at certain times. So it was very, very interesting to have an opportunity to talk to her and how she sees her position in Pakistan, and perhaps what her hopes for the country are. So yeah, another fascinating person to talk to.
So let's take a dip into this 5-minute chat as well here.
What's your great hope for Pakistan at this point?
Well, I would simply say, whenever in time I was raised, part of our culture is how they said, whenever you're invited into someone's home, you want to leave. Whenever you leave, you want to leave with such a good feeling of your host that they miss you. They want you back. That you leave that place better off than when you first came into it. And that is certainly my point, my interest. And I do think of Pakistan as my second home. But I qualified for naturalization actually now, so I may well work very soon on applying for my naturalization in Pakistan. And I do want to touch on what you mentioned about the women too, that I hope there is a bit of cognitive dissonance as it relates to how people feel on a very systemic level. It's very rare to find a very singular or monolithic way of thinking about one simple thing. In other words, I'm an American white female, okay, automatic suspicion, but I'm also a guest, so I must be welcomed, given food, this, and this, and flowers thrown in my face, and so forth and so on. So there's sort of don't want to use the term bipolar, but you get my point. The dual thinking of a lot of these core issues.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can I circle back to something you were saying about tourism? Just the opportunity really to use, I mean, having watched some of your films, you know, you bring to life, I think, very well, obviously with your filmmaking background, the difference of the Pakistan that we see in the media and that we know about. You'd have to kind of watch a travel program, and here you are with all sorts of access as well, and having, you know, myself, you know, spent time with various units like you were talking about there in Nigeria and Cambodia. When you travel with them, you get to see a different side of things as well. Do you think tourism is going to be a real opportunity to open up certain parts of the country that people don't normally see, and that's how we change? You mentioned Kate and William going, for example. Do you see that as one of those things? And then trade and all of that I mean, that beautiful furniture behind you. You mentioned the lamp there made from camel skin, and some people will go like that. Well, actually, no. If that's what people do, we need to let go sometimes of our own prejudice and understand. And tourism's a great way of doing it.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of individuals, particularly, I caught a lot of flack because when I was beginning to promote tourism, a lot of people assumed that it was because I was, you know, label me a military stooge or shill or a spokesperson for the military or whatever the case is. And nothing could have been further from the truth. Obviously, as a Westerner, you know, just like when you work for any government or entity, you have to pass your clearances, right? And foreigners simply cannot travel to these areas unless they have their clearances, much like if you go to work for the UK government or the military or the US government, you have to have your clearances. And so obviously I've had to go through extensive background screening and checks and so forth. And I've made it no secret that I've traveled with the military to a lot of these. I don't have anything to hide. But I've also been very clear when I speak to the military, when I've gone to GHQ or when I, you know, off camera, whatever the situation is, I am not interested in propaganda one way or the other. I don't want their propaganda. I don't want the West propaganda. What I want is fact and the truth as is relative to the individuals that I speak to. In other words, my truth may be different from your truth, John, or your truth, Andy. You know, when we finish this conversation, I may feel like, oh, that went really well, and you two may think I'm a bozo. You know, it doesn't make it right or wrong, but just make it that it just is. And so that's been part of my goal. And for tourism, it wasn't, I was never trying to say, oh, I'm being paid to do this, this, and this. I actually see tourism as a positive way for Pakistan to be held accountable. Because when you, let's say, we all know what a Yelp review is, or if you do Airbnb, right? So if you stay at someone's doing Airbnb and the host was gracious and they provided everything and the pictures were as described and you felt the experience was wonderful, this is a reputation economy. And a reputation economy is one of the best ways of holding an individual or an institution or a country accountable. Everyone needs feedback, constructive feedback. And tourism is one of the best ways to provide objective, constructive feedback to Pakistan, because a lot of the time I hear from the West, oh, they just don't listen. You have to find a way of actually learning to communicate in the Eastern style. In other words, when I was filming, we had a couple of guys come up and they were sort of staring at our camera crew, and their 70cc was interfering with their audio. Now, there would have been a time where earlier on where I might have said, would you please stop that? And of course, they do the exact opposite. So I have to use reverse psychology. So
she's a fascinating character. I must admit, that's probably one of the most interesting. I think you're on mute again, Andy. So I think you're one of the most interesting characters I've met in a long time. Particularly as an American, they're always a certain way, and they come across in a certain way as well. Views that they have of world views, and obviously being a Texan is quite an interesting viewpoint of the world anyway that you carry with you. I mean, quite interesting. I mean, different or the same or similar to the conversation you had with her for about 2 hours on a Saturday morning a few months ago.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, John, another remarkable woman, very strong views, passionate about Pakistan, passionate about social justice, passionate about human rights, and in a rather strange position, as this feisty Texan, an American in Pakistan, loves the culture, but is not afraid to challenge government and institutions within that country. So I think very, very interesting indeed. And I don't know, maybe it's a sign that the regime, if you like, in Pakistan, in which the army has enormous power, is allowing criticism of the establishment. I don't know, or is it perhaps that Cynthia has some very powerful friends that allows her to remain and operate as she does? But she does some great work, and I've also seen some of her documentaries looking at another aspect of Pakistan, which is its arts and its heritage, its history. I mean, Pakistan is full of hidden treasures. And that's why it was interesting to hear her saying that her big hope for Pakistan is that tourism will open up the country a little bit and kind of in that way start to allow things to happen on other aspects of the country's sort of issues, if you like, or difficulties. So yeah, very, very interesting. So I'd also like to say that, Cynthia also has a heart of gold and has also been supporting the school that we've mentioned, as have indeed Madame Rabia, the politician, and Nagin Hayat in Islamabad, and others, including several leading Pathan or Pashto singers that have actually, on request, provided dedicated songs, especially for the children at this particular Karachi school, which I think is rather wonderful. So it's been a collective effort, if you like, of like minds. They may be coming from different positions, but they're finding that common ground and have actually adopted a cause and have made things happen. So I'm enormously grateful to all those players and all those strings that are being pulled to help several hundred children from very, very poor backgrounds to have that education, which, as we've also discussed, is the future, not just in Pakistan, but around the world. It's our young people that have to take things forward and make a better world for all of us, really.
Great. Well, listen, well done to you, Andy, because all of these people all came together as well because you are the catalyst for this. So I think it's you need to take a little bit of credit for that as well. That you've managed to pull this showcase together, and we're very lucky to be able to do it. And obviously use the Dot Media Centre for doing it. So that's all great. And people have been engaging and sharing comments and stuff. So, and I'm sure they'll enjoy going and looking at the blog post. But I want to finish with the wonderful songs that we've managed to get. So first of all is Bilal Sekandri. Is that correct? Did I say that?
Bilal Sekandri, yes, he's a leading Pashto singer. Now the Pashto culture is up in the northwest where the earthquake was so devastating, and he's rallied to the call to devote, to dedicate this song to the children, as has indeed Shakila Naz, who was a legend, absolute legend on the Pashto singing scene. But yes. Take it away, John, with Mr. Bilal.
Well, what we'll do is we'll show his shout out first, because I think it's fantastic that not only did they do the song, but they also gave us a shout out as well, didn't they? So let's play this first. We'll tee this one up. Marvelous. I think that's amazing. I don't know what it is about it. It makes me really interested. I've watched it a couple of times now, and I just think it's absolutely fascinating that he would take the time not only to dedicate the song and speak to us and communicate with you as well, Andy, but then to actually take the time to make a message as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. Hello, Leicester. Hello, Islamabad, and especially for the children of Nona Hall Academy. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, I think it's great. Anybody who takes the time to do that is a good person as far as I'm concerned. So let's have a quick listen. We're not going to listen to the whole song because it's actually quite long. So we'll play the first minute or so so people kind of get a feel for what it's like. And obviously it's embedded on your Facebook and it can be linked to from the blog post. Isn't that marvelous? I think it's absolutely fantastic. We should end every event with some live music.
Sure. It's very relaxing. It's very soothing, isn't it, John? But no, and yes, he's an absolute sweetheart, the guy. And the song itself is from a poem, and the poem is entitled "When a Nightingale Weeps." So, that's very moving, isn't it? But that's a beautiful piece of music, and the second artist that we're going to feature is Madame Shakila Naz, and she is an absolute legend. She's only last year received Afghanistan's highest award for the arts. From the government there. She plays regularly in the very highest circles of government and so on, and she has a huge following across Pakistan and Afghanistan. She's only the second Pakistani to ever receive this award from the Afghan government. And again, she has kindly sent a very personal message to us and everybody involved in the school, which is absolutely superb. And I can't thank all of these artists and musicians, and indeed everybody that's helped us with this. Absolutely wonderful.
So let's play that again, that shout out, which is amazing. Listened to it a couple of times again, and it was just fantastic to get.
Salamuna and greetings to dear friends in Lister, Islamabad, and especially the children of Nonehal Academy, Karachi. Mashallah, this song is for you all.
Incredible. I mean, it's so wonderful that people would take the time to send a personal message as well, not just to you know, send you a song or say this is for you, feel free to use it however you want, you know what I mean? It's yeah, it's great. So this one's coming up. So this is a song. So what we're going to do is we'll play a couple of minutes of this again, just to get, because it's quite long, just to give people a flavour of what it is, and it's linked again into in the Dot Media Centre blog post. Again, just a short clip, but I reckon that was amazing live to have actually been there listening to that.
What a relaxing play out for a Saturday afternoon or evening. Indeed, it's wonderful. I think it's quite interesting. It's a little bit distinctive from mainstream Indian Pakistani music, in that there's more of an Eastern influence there, you know, from the Middle East. As I say, part of Pakistan's southwestern border is with Iran, and there's that sort of Persian and then towards the Middle East, that sort of influence that creeps in there to Pashto music. Absolutely wonderful, and you know, our thanks to Shakila Naz for that beautiful piece of music.
So Andy, we're about to end now, and so thank you for anybody that's watching this back, or anyone that's been joining us live. We've had people dip in and out on Facebook, which is great. And just to remind people, the catalyst for us actually doing something today on the last day of the Parallel Lives program, but also the World Day of Social Justice, is we were talking about, when you approached me, you wanted to do some sort of fundraiser with all of these people that you had, So Nagin with Nomad, obviously Cynthia, Madame Rambia, and you knew Latif at the school because you had a connection with him from when you were there for your new humanitarian novel. And we wanted to do something because the school was looking like it was going to close. So fingers crossed with you have managed to do something there, bring people together to galvanize some action. And obviously this is what drove these two songs to us. So what I want to do is we're going to play something that the children sent us to end with. So once I've played that, then we'll stop. But final comment from you as to, you know, today and what you hope for going forward with the Academy.
No, I think, you know, we've covered quite a few areas today, but of course we could talk and we could talk and talk about both the good things about Pakistan, of which there are many, and some of the lesser good things, some of the issues which still exist and still hold certain sections of society back. So my hope for Pakistan lies in people like Nagin Hayat, people like, you know, Madame Rabia, the politician, who is so passionate to improve things for children and, of course, for girls and women. And Pakistan will be able to move forward. We've heard also from Cynthia Ritchie and her great hope for Pakistan. There is a lot to see in Pakistan. In my view, it has everything. It is it's a very beautiful country geographically. So physically, the landscape is, you know, is marvelous. You know, the mountains are just breathtaking. You know, they've got K2 in the extreme north, which is the second highest peak, of course, in the world. All those northern areas, they've got deserts, they've got jungles, they've got coastline in the south and everything in between. And they've got a beautiful people as well and a rich and varied culture. So everything should be going, you know, in the right direction for Pakistan. And I hope it only accelerates. And that it is able to focus with success on some of the areas that perhaps it needs to take its place, you know, on a truly sort of international basis. So that's my hope. That's my hope for Pakistan. I hope the novel that I've written gives an insight into Pakistani culture as well. That was another aspect of the novel, not just to pay tribute to the people who have been caught up in disaster, but in fact to the culture itself as well, and of course to those people that assisted during that time and continue perhaps to do good work. People like Syed Latif, you know, who I know has been shot and very, very seriously injured in the past. He's lost his close associate, Abdul Wahid Khan, who was assassinated for wanting to educate little girls in 2013. You know, these are courageous people, you know, that feel passionate enough to risk their own lives to improve the lives of others. And I find that truly inspiring. You know, I would say to anybody, you know, that would like to become involved in any kind of project, whether it's here in the UK or whether it's in the developing world, you know, go ahead, do it. And you might be surprised how quickly those boundaries you may have put in front of you to say, well, perhaps I can't do that, they just fall away. And, you know, I've only had good experiences in the work that I've done in South Asia and indeed in Africa. That's been my experience, and that you actually, you benefit yourself. Whatever you give, you get, you know, many times in return, in my experience. So yeah, don't be afraid to go out and do something and to try and make a difference, because you might be surprised at just what you can achieve. So, you know, I've enjoyed it today. John, I can't thank you enough for hosting this with me today and, you know, for providing a platform. I think the work you do is amazing. I know you have contacts in you know, across 100 countries, and you too are a passionate educator and documentarian. So I thank you as well today. It's been a good session, and I hope people do take a look at the package that's up there, some of the recorded interviews, the songs, the clips, you know, and the materials that are there for people who want to learn, want to find out more.
Yep, we've got some great stuff on there. You know, not only can you watch Peter's and Miller's and Zynthia's full interviews that are on there, but also we've got something that was sent to us by Nagin about Nomad that she's done recently for us, which is great. But also a previous interview that she's done, a little bit more history, which is really interesting. Something from her daughter as well that's there. So all the people that have supported us, and please have a look at Andy's both book. You can buy the ebook as well, where you're donating to the school, aren't you, with the ebook, which is great. And certainly looking on your website with the blog, there's more photographs from your time there and a little bit more about the book and your experiences, which I think, you know, really rounded it off for me. So I definitely would encourage people to participate in that. And so finally, we're going to play this little clip. It's only sort of 10 or 15 seconds, I think it is, from the children. But if you thought the two clips from Bilal and Mr. Sekandri were amazing, wait till you check out this. Oh,
isn't that wonderful?
They won't stop now. That's it. They're on an endless loop of 11 seconds of. I do love "Hello Leicester," and they're just absolutely loud. Probably louder than the King Power Stadium. That's how you do it.
Well, that's right. A little bit of other further news on that. I know the politician, Madame Rabia, is visiting the school tomorrow to actually hand out free school uniforms and footwear, shoes for some of the children there as well. We only just saw a small number of them. There are actually hundreds of them, girls and boys, at the school. So it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you very much to Madame Rabia for supporting us today, coming on, taking the time on a Saturday. That's great. It's really good to see her and hear the work that she does, and certainly I think to keep an eye on that and speak to her more, particularly building a relationship with some young women from certainly that I know around the world as well, that are involved in politics in various countries where they're up against some real challenges. I think would be amazing. So that's great. So Andy, well done. Congratulations. Here we go. Right. We've managed to steer our way through 2 hours and 25 minutes. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Please have a look at the website, .mediacentre.org, where the package is. And we look forward to seeing you for another Pakistan showcase at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Allah Hafiz, as they say.